This is the Late Late Lunch Show with Rod Maxwell.
Supported by
Childbed learning in nature's playground.
So it's Rod Maxwell on the Late Late Lunch Show, and I am in Cheshire today. And I'm at a place called Weetwood Ales, which is in the middle of the countryside, and it's a place that brews beer and distills whiskey. And I'm here with one of the brewers, Matthew Knopp. Matthew, lovely to be here. It's an unbelievable place, both because of what it produces and the size of that, and also we're sitting here in this beautiful bar, restaurant type area. Tell us the background. When did it all start?
Okay, so 1992, Adrian, who was a brewer at Greenall's Brewery in Warrington, when it closed down, he decided he'd like to continue brewing. He had a friend, Roger Langford, who was a pig farmer. So them two got their heads together. Roger had the space, so he owned a barn, and Adrian had all the brewing knowledge and experience. So together, they started Weetwood. Now, the name Weetwood comes from the tiny hamlet, which is probably half a mile from where we are now, with about 3 houses and, like I say, a barn. That's where the brewery began. That's where the name comes from. And when the brewery needed to increase in size, it moved to this current site in, I think, around 2011. I think so.
And so on this site, you are brewing several different beers, and we'll get onto them in a minute. Plus, you're distilling whiskies as well, and it's a big process. And we just actually spent about an hour walking through it, and I have to tell you guys, the smells are unbelievable. And now we're in this is like a bar, restaurant type area.
Yeah, we refer to it as the tap room.
The tap.
So we can showcase all our beers directly from the brewery. You know, it's a 200-yard trip to the cellar. We have Kat, who's the tap room manager. She can liaise with us what beer she wants to sell and showcase that week, and it just gets absolutely rammed. It's brilliant.
Well, I have to say it's an absolutely wonderful looking bar, and I'm drinking the non-alcoholic lager, which is very good as well. And we'll talk a little bit more about the whole process of brewing beer. And I wish I had smelly vision because the smells have been brilliant. But we'll be back with Matthew here at Weetwood Ales in a couple of minutes' time.
You're listening to the Late Late Lunch Show with
Back to the Garden Childcare, where little explorers grow naturally.
So, Matthew, what you're brewing here are a range of different beers, ales, lagers, and I guess it all starts with core British ingredients, which is malt barley and malt wheat.
Yeah, majority malted barley, some malted wheat, and a few specialist sort of malts as well.
And it requires a lot of energy because you're putting very hot liquid in with different mixtures of the wheat and the barley, which ultimately is giving it its very distinctive flavors of whatever you want.
Exactly that. Yeah, we've created recipes over the years, different amounts of different barleys, you know, different colors, different aromas, and we just have to make sure we're consistent every time with every recipe.
And so you guys are doing a bit of research here. You create different flavors and then you replicate that in a scale that means that you can produce it for bars and whatever across the country.
Yeah, exactly that. We have a small sort of pilot kit. It's more like a home brewer's kit, really, but it works perfectly for us to sort of let our minds run a bit wild. If we have a beer style that we don't brew, that one of us would like to brew, we give it a try on the test kit. If it doesn't work, we go back to the drawing board, we try it again. We're not wasting huge amounts of ingredients. We're not wasting huge amounts of time. So it's really good fun. And then every now and then, one of them recipes will stick. We can then scale it up to the big kit. So there's a limit to the smallest batch we can brew on the big kit. So we have to scale it up to that. We scale it up the malt, the hops, we brew it. And then hopefully, fingers crossed, it comes out and it's very, very nice.
So the room we've been in, which starts with the tank where I'll call it the mulch, but the mix of the malted grain and barley goes into a tank and there's very hot liquid put onto that.
Yes.
And then that is transferred to other tanks. I mean, it seems to go through about 3, 4, 5 different stages before you get to what would be the alcoholic beer.
Yeah. So you have you mentioned the mulch, the mash is what we call it.
mash.
So that's the malted barley. The recipe is mixed with hot water in the mash tun. So in the mash tun, the conversion of the starch inside the grain happens, and that converts the starch into simple sugars. Like you say, that liquid is then transferred into, we have an underback, we have a kettle where it's boiled. We then pump that into a fermenting vessel. So it goes through 3 or 4 different vessels before we then are adding yeast and fermenting it. It then, once it's fermented, will go into yet another vessel for conditioning.
And then from there, it's then put into the different kegs. So that end-to-end process, how long does it take for you to take the raw ingredient and then to be able to put that into a barrel that go to a pub?
Quite simply, a week. So let's say we brew Cheshire Cat on a Monday. Wednesday, fermentation would be complete. Friday, that Cheshire Cat brew would be moved into a conditioning tank. It's conditioned all weekend, Friday, Saturday, Sunday. Monday morning, that beer is ready to put into cask and go to customers.
And one thing that strikes me is there's a lot of heat, there's a lot of energy that the process goes through. Those big steel vats, I mean, they have to put up a lot of pressure that builds with the beer being, well, what would you call it? It's not distilled, is it? But beer being brewed.
Brewed, yeah, absolutely. Yeah, so the process of fermentation will create new yeast. Now that will itself expand inside the tank. So when you're talking about pressure, we have to have breather caps on the top of the tank. So a lot of CO2 is produced during fermentation. So the breather caps work so that the CO2 and the yeast can escape out the top, but nothing could come in and cause any infection. So that's how we control the pressure during fermentation. We also try to keep enough headspace in the tank so that it has space to do that without causing unnecessary stress.
It's an incredibly complicated process. Your background actually was in chemistry, was it?
For a chemical works. So many of you might have heard of ICI, the giant chemical works. So it was Brunner Mond who took over from ICI. That was where I used to work as a process operator, which for me lends itself perfectly to brewing, because brewing is just a process. It's this at this time, this at this time, consistently every day. So my background lends itself perfectly to that. And since I've been here for 10 years now, I've now added the theoretical understanding to my...
I have to say, it's one of the things I'm not very good at is consistency, and I would make a terrible brewer because I couldn't resist the urge to tinker, and that's one thing you can't do, can you really?
No, not with the core range of beers that we brew, which the customers come to expect to be the same every time. Like I mentioned, the pilot kit is where we can tinker. But the main catalogue of beers, they have to be the same every time, so we need to make sure we're on it consistency-wise.
This is the Late Late Lunch Show with Rod Maxwell on Radio Alti.
So it's Rod Maxwell, and I'm out in Cheshire. I needed the sat nav actually. I don't know Cheshire very well, Matthew. It's gorgeous out here. It's absolutely gorgeous. Just to come back a little bit, you have people who come here to sample the beers. It's a restaurant, it's a bar, isn't it?
Yeah, absolutely. So when we decided to create the tap brew, we wanted to just make somewhere that everyone can just come for a friendly drink. But we do find there's a lot of people come from quite far away to come here, which is a testament to the atmosphere that we've created, to the beers that we brew. A few years ago, we started to do brewery tours with the idea of letting more people know where we're situated. Because like you just said, we're not really situated. We're in the middle of nowhere.
Yeah.
So the idea behind the brewery tours was to let more people know where we are. And now we've added the tap room, of course. Word of mouth spreads where you can come and you can sit, you can have a pork pie, you can have some crisps, you can have a gin, a whiskey, a beer. It's just gone from strength to strength.
No, in the last, I guess it might be 10 years or a little bit more, people have become more curious and desiring more artisan foods, drinks, etc.
Yeah.
I mean, have you guys got any theories as to why that is? I mean, it fits your marketplace perfectly because big brands are not as trendy anymore.
No.
People are looking for something that's a bit more local, if you like.
I think they're not as desirable anymore, the big brands. I think people kind of look at them and think, "Hey, you're not putting any effort in. You can create a product en masse that hasn't really had any thought put into it. Whereas you come to a local brewer like us, everything we do has thought gone into it. We think about every stage of the process. None of it's easy. The job's very physical. So I think people just want value for the money. If I'm being honest, that's the way I see things nowadays. Anyway.
Yeah, and there's a uniqueness about what you're getting. Although you part of your job as one of the brewers is to get the consistency every time with every one.
Oh, 100%. When you spoke about uniqueness, it's us producing Cheshire's first single malt. That's unique. And that alone, that takes so much work for us to do. You know, whiskey needs to have aged for 3 years before we can even call it whiskey. And it might not be ready at 3 years. We have to then test it, taste it, and then maybe it needs another couple of years. So you're talking years of investment to create a very unique product, which now we do, and now people know about. Everybody seems to love.
Yeah, and I mean, it's you put a lot of effort into discover and create. Then it's about replication, isn't it?
Absolutely, yeah.
Well, we'll be back speaking with Matthew, and we're going to be talking a little bit more about the whiskey. But I want to come back and talk about the beers and just what you are actually brewing here and what's on offer.
You're listening to the Late Late Lunch Show with
Back to the Garden Childcare, where little explorers grow naturally.
So we've trial brewed another sort of pale ale. I won't give too much away, but we've trial brewed that currently. We just need to taste that and see whether we're happy for that to go to, bigger production. Now, you spoke to Phil earlier, who said to you, our core question when we're brewing something new is, would you have another pint of it?
Yeah.
So you can have one, and if you go, no, I don't think I would, that's not what we want. We want our customers to be returning customers, to have 3 or 4 pints. So that'll determine whether we continue with that beer or we change it. So I see by the end of this week, we'll know the answer to that, and then we may be brewing it in the next few weeks.
And what is the modern beer drinker looking for these days? Is it no longer just a very strong beer to get bladdered, is it?
No.
They're looking for taste, and they're looking for something that complements other things like food.
Absolutely. So there's very few people. There are still some that come in and want the strongest beer possible because they're going to have 2 pints and then they're done. But 95% of especially our customer base, they want something between 3 and 4% that they can come in, they can have 4 or 5 pints of it. They're not legless, and they know consistently that it's going to be top notch. And that's where our core customer range is. So that's where we focus most of our time.
And traditionally, British ales have been a little bit flatter. You don't always get the head that you would associate with a lager or you associate with a Guinness.
Yeah.
Is that typical of Weetwood ales?
No, not at all. No, we put a lot of effort into recipe development and choosing the right ingredients to make sure that you're going to get that creamy head and it's going to stay at the top of that pint, the whole pint. Now, we brew a beer called Harlequin, which is an English pale ale, all English malt, all English hops. Now, traditionally, the American, New Zealand, Australian hops have the punchy flavours, but UK's catching up slowly. But we believe Harlequin, if you get a chance to try that, is a very good representation of what the UK can produce and what Weetwood can produce.
And that head does make a big difference, doesn't it? I mean, it changes the taste or the feeling of tasting the beer.
100%, yeah, because a lot of your taste is through your smell, and a lot of the smell of your hops and ingredients are in the head. So for you to produce a good head when pouring the pint, but be able to keep that head on the pint while you're drinking it is so important. If that dies, you'll find that the flavour and aroma of your beer will not die with it, but it will not be as enjoyable.
So are you guys constantly thinking about what people are looking for, what the marketplace is looking for, and responding to that? Because tastes change at times.
Definitely, yeah. We'll have sort of not weekly meetings, but maybe monthly meetings, the brewers group with Phil, and we just look at he does all the research on beer trends. So he will come to us with a printout. This is what seems to be popular. This is what we might do for Christmas. We might do a Christmas ale. Then we can go away. We can do some recipe development, use the pilot kit again, see where we get to with that. And basically, like I say, he will do the work on the trends and we will just sort of make products to suit the trends.
And again, coming back to the whole culinary, the whole British scene, people are pairing beers as they used to pair food with wine.
Absolutely, yeah. There's that many styles of beer now that it lends itself perfectly. You have your punchy American IPAs, which you can pair with certain foods. You also have your stouts, which pair perfectly with other foods. So I think the increase in beer styles, like I say, lends itself perfectly to pairing with food, definitely.
Right, we'll be back and talking to Matthew in a couple of minutes' time.
This is the Late Late Lunch Show with Rod Maxwell.
Supported by
Childbed learning in nature's playground.
It's Rod Maxwell, and I'm down in deepest, most beautifulest Cheshire at Weetwood Eels. It's called Cheshire's Brewery and Distillery. And but let's talk about the distillery for a minute, because you should be part of that process. The smell across the whole place is gorgeous, but going into one of those rooms with the casks, the smell was like you just wanted to have some ice cream and pour that over the top of it. It just was gorgeous. What would you say is the key difference between a brewer and a distiller and that process, Matthew?
So, in terms of creating the liquid that you are going to distill and creating a beer to that point, they're very similar. Now, the only discernible difference from that point is you're not boiling that liquid with hops as you would do with a beer. It's at that point when that liquid makes its way into the still that everything's completely different. So you're then boiling that liquid so that the alcoholic vapor will rise off. You're then condensing that alcoholic vapor back into a liquid. You're storing that. If you're making whiskey, you're storing that in wood. If you're making gin, you've flavored it already. So it's at that point that we enter the distillery that brewing and distilling are completely different.
And you showed me it is the still, is it? And it's a beautiful piece of. It's almost like something you would expect in an old Doctor Who movie that he was using to power his movement into space. But it's got different levels where the whiskey is rising, and that you get different levels of concentration of alcohol. Is that right?
Exactly right. Yeah. So the whiskey wash will come up to a boiling point. The alcoholic vapor will come off. It then passes through the column. So it's like a plate column. So each one of them plates, we have 3, is a separate distillation. So the idea is that the vapor works its way up and it recondenses. It comes back down and it works its way up again and it recondenses. And it goes through all 3 plates. The ABV will rise as it goes through the plate. It then recondenses in the condenser and we have a strong whiskey spirit for us to cut to a certain ABV to then age in the cask.
And I guess in some ways, once you've done that, that's where the difference between distilling and brewing changes, because your beers can almost go out the door immediately. You're keeping your whiskey for, is it 3 years minimum?
Minimum, yeah. So to legally be called and sold as whiskey, it must spend 3 years minimum in cask. So that's our bare minimum amount of time that we keep spirit in the cask before we can sell it. We then decide, do we want to keep it longer? Is it good enough to sell at 3 years? Sometimes we think, no, it needs a bit more aging. So we can take a lot longer to be able to produce a spirit that we think is good enough to sell. Whereas, like you just mentioned, a week from brew to in the cask, the beer's ready to go out. It's straight out of the door. It has an 8-week shelf life from the moment it's put into cask, straight out the door, and people can drink it. Whereas it's there's a lot more investment in whiskey and spirit production.
Whereas with the beer, almost the process ends from the moment it goes into its keg. Actually, with whiskey, it's another stage of the process because it's fermenting or it was distilling. It's picking up the flavors of the, is it cherry wood, oak wood, or whatever in the barrel?
So for most of its life, it'll be in oak barrels. And then depending on the finish we want for the product, we put them in different finishing barrels. So as you saw in the whiskey store, we have red wine, we have port barrels, we have sherry barrels, we have a whole host of finishing casks, which it can then spend sort of 6 months, 12 months longer in the finishing cask. It then picks up the nuanced flavors from each of them casks. We can decide to do a sherry cask release, or we can sort of blend them all together back into another cask and finish it in a different cask. So it all depends on what we're looking to release as a final product and whether we're happy with what comes out of that cask.
And so just to pick up on that, if you're doing a taste test of a whiskey, you might decide actually to get where you want it to be, it needs to spend a bit longer, or you change the nature of the cask. And that's where the real, I guess, the art of it and the knowledge of the distiller really comes through.
Yeah, so our spirit that we create from our barley, our whiskey spirit, is very distinctive. It's got a Weetwood flavour. That's the best way for me to explain it. So if we taste a cask after 3 years, we will instantly know it tastes too much like the base spirit still, so that needs longer. We try after, we go, oh no, that's had enough time. But that distinctive Weetwood spirit flavour is very noticeable, certainly for us, because we've tried it quite a lot. So that sort of is where we draw the line. Think, no, it needs to have slightly less of the Weetwood spirit flavour and more of the wood flavour. That's kind of where we draw the line, I'd say. Yeah.
This is the Late Late Lunch Show with Rod Maxwell on Radio Alti.
So it's Rod Maxwell on the Late Late Lunch Show, supported by our friends from Back to the Garden Childcare. And I'm down in Weetwood, Cheshire's Brewery and Distillery. And I have to say, if you're looking for a day out, come down here. You can come into their tap room. You can buy some of the product. You can drink some of the products here. And there's a very nice non-alcoholic lager, probably one of the best I've ever had, which means you can have a beer and also drive at the same time. I'm speaking with Matthew, one of the brewers here. Matthew, how far do your beers travel? I mean, what is it across the UK? Is it across England?
So if they are sold to a wholesaler, they can go anywhere in the country. We do supply Cheshire Cat to a famous pub in Soho, London, the Devonshire. Some of you may be aware of that. So they serve Cheshire Cat regularly. Now, our team of 3 drivers can only go so far in a day. You know, they can only carry so many barrels. They can only go so far. So we go west as far as Anglesey and then all over Greater Manchester, Merseyside, Preston, Lancashire. I'm not sure there's anywhere else I've missed, but quite a decent radius for such a small team, I'd say, with only 3 vans.
You're bottling as well as casking, is that right?
So we don't bottle on site, unfortunately. Because of space, we don't have space for a bottling machine. So we do send our beers in 1,000-litre IBCs to a place in Cumbria. They will do kegging and bottling and canning for us.
And will it do in the bottle just as well as it would do in a cask?
It gets more shelf life because it's filtered. They get 12 months of shelf life in a bottle. Cans are slightly different depending on the beer style as well. So for a beer like Turncoat, which is naturally hazy, it gets very finely filtered. Therefore, there's more natural material in that can, so it gets less of a shelf life. It gets about 6 months.
So coming back to the whole process and the whole industry of brewing, it's something that Britain was very famous for. Burton was very famous for, and that was partly because of the water, wasn't it, I think? And then it seemed like we lost our way a little bit, and some other nations, America, are very keen on different, and have a lot of microbreweries actually, have very keen on the beers. Do you think that the industry and the craft in this country has returned, and that British English beers are up there with the best?
Yes, in a word, yeah. I think it's definitely had a resurgence. I know of several local breweries just in this area, because this is the only area that I'm really familiar with. But I think the British beer, the British industry is definitely on the rise, even despite the news articles that you read that, the big boys are monopolizing and they're taking over everything. From what I see here day to day at Weetwood, we're getting busier and busier week by week. So I can only say, British beer, our beer is making a right comeback.
As one of the brewers here, it must almost feel like there's always something else you want to be able to create.
Yes.
But part of what you have to be great at is consistency. But do you have an idea of a beer that you would like to actually make, or is there a type that feels out of touch because it's quite technically challenging, or is there one that you would really like to try to create?
Well, there's a style that's quite controversial and quite challenging to make, which is a sour beer. So I've had many sort of raspberry berry sours, but you're purposely infecting the yeast so that it will give you the sourness in the final product, which seems completely backwards for what we're trying to do. We don't want infection in there at all. So to brew one of them beers, it's very technically difficult, and you could risk further infection into the beers that we already brew. So as much as I'd like to brew one, I don't think I'll ever get the permission to try, unfortunately, but they are very tasty.
So it's got a like berry and fruity style.
You can brew a berry sort of a raspberry sour, or you could brew a regular sort of pale ale sour. You can do whatever you like. It's the sourness that does the singing, which for me, I really like, but they're very controversial. I'd say I'm probably in a minority there.
And of your range of beers here, because you go from the lagers, the non-alcoholic lagers, into the ales, and of course the Cheshire Cat, isn't it?
Yeah, Cheshire Cat, it's blonde. We brew everything through to silverback stout, everything in between. So we have ambers, we have English pale ales, New England pale ales, IPAs, Jester, we have two bitters. Every beer style, apart from sours, that you can think of, we make a pretty good one.
So of all those, if you could only ever drink one Weetwood ale or beer again, what would it be?
Harlequin.
And what is that?
So that is an English pale ale. So that's full English malt recipe and 100% English hops. It's superb, really easy drinking, not too strong, sort of mid-4 ABV. Just the fact that it's English, everything's English, and it just tastes superb. That would be the one.
And what would you pair that with in food-wise?
Ooh, some kind of white meat, I think, maybe chicken. Yeah, I'd say some chicken or something along them lines. Yeah.
Oh, it's been a pleasure to spend a bit of the time here, and I've enjoyed the non-alcoholic, which is, what is that branded as?
So it's called Pussycat.
Pussycat. Well, I'll tell you what, it's very nice actually. It's one of the best non-alcoholic lagers I've ever tasted.
Yeah, we think so. Yeah, we did our research, and we researched that even the people who are known for making non-alcoholic beers, and we weren't that impressed, but we are impressed with our own.
It's still got the lingering aftertaste of a lager.
Good.
And it's just brilliant. And we're a bit less stuffy about lagers these days, aren't we?
Yeah. So not to down tread lagers, but it's difficult to get a lot of flavour into a lager. Whereas if you think of an IPA, it's all about flavour. So yeah. I mean, for a non-alcoholic, it's pretty good.
It's very good indeed. Well, look, if you're ever in the area, I think you could definitely take a trip to Weetwood Ales. Come down. You can buy from the shop. You can sample down here. You can do some food pairings. And if you're thinking of doing something a bit different, maybe with a company, you can come down here and hold an event. Matthew, it's been a pleasure. Thank you very much for your time.
Thank you. Nice to meet you. Thanks very much.